Hey guys, thanks for showing up. Rush Luck here, and I'm just gonna show you a breakdown of how to deal damage. So if you're struggling and all that good stuff, you came to the right place. It may be a really long video, so you could probably skip ahead to certain parts and get the most of it, but I should be able to help you out a bit. And in that beginning, of course, I was just using the Wrath of Gold ability, which has a ton of AoE, plenty of damage, but that's not that important. What's really important is this guy. You really want to get to know this blacksmith a ton, because without him, there's no way you're going to deal damage. As you can see, I'm kind of scrolling through the weapons. You can see that they have this thing on the screen here called attribute scaling. Now, the scaling itself will determine how much it'll increase based off of your stats. And they rank it based off of A to E. The only reason I say that's important for you to kind of take a look at is because if a weapon at its base level is starting at D or E, typically it's probably not a weapon that you want to upgrade. Now, if it starts at a C or above, then you definitely want to upgrade it. Not only will it get really good scaling, but as you level it up, it'll actually morph into the next scaling. With my banished halberd that I had gotten way in the beginning of the game, I continued to put attribute points into it with the smithing stones, and I actually ended up getting it all the way to A, as you can see. So A is extremely high scaling. You can see it's getting 279 based off of my strength attribute, and even though it doesn't have as much attack power as, say, maybe this actual greatsword that I have in my hand, that weapon itself still is really amazing, because it has great opportunities for DPS, and at times if it crits, it can hit twice. And as you can see for this one, if I one-hand it on the top right, the character status, you can see that the attack power goes up to 743, and if I two-hand it, the damage will increase to 782, which will put you at a much higher DPS range. And then of course God's Vow, which is extremely awesome for making yourself a little bit more tanky. As you can see, it buffed me up to 855 one-handed, and two-handed puts me all the way at 900 damage. So whenever you're thinking of getting the most out of your weapons, you have to think about your buffs, you have to think about all that other good stuff. Now, this is going to be really helpful if you're deciding what path to take. It's really helpful to go as a wretch in the beginning of the game, because you get to start with a clean slate. You don't have to worry about respecking or any of that, and you could just gear your champ towards exactly what you want. This is more of a strength faith build with a little bit of dexterity just to hold on to this weapon. And of course, later on into the game, I'm going to be using a little bit more endurance and vigor to equip heavier items and to not be one-shotted all the time. So yeah, I'm just showing right here. I buffed with the God's Vow, then put Electrify Armament, just so you can see that with my banished halberd level 19 with the heavy attachment added onto it, the Spinning Strikes Ash of War, it'll put me at 793. So of course that's about 107 points less than the Magma Greatsword. But what makes this one so great is the weapon art, and I'll showcase why that weapon art is so awesome a little bit later in the video if you really want to stick around. But the main thing that you really need to get out of this game is when you're looking at a weapon, check the attribute scaling. When it's at level 1, check if it's a C, D, B, A, or whatever, and then from that point decide, is this going to be a weapon for the champ that I'm using? So no matter how much you like a weapon in the game, a lot of people don't realize this, but you can't just use every weapon all the time unless you stat dump in every single category, which turns the game into easy mode. I kind of try to stick around the 100 to 150 level range, because the game is still pretty balanced at that point. You can still get one or two shotted. But I mean, if you're trying to do everything, of course stat dump, but if you're trying to go for a very specific build, this is definitely the way to go. I use strength. I had strength about level 55, or strength level, I think about level 55, and faith level 50, and everything else was pretty much just whatever I wanted at the time. what I'm doing here, I'm going to showcase against mid-range enemies just how much your the damage scaling will affect you, right? So most people don't realize this as well, but I don't know if you noticed, but it's raining outside, so it's kind of perfect. So I picked a flame spell just to showcase it. Now that flame spell takes more FP, so it should hit harder, right? Now when it's raining, electric spells deal more damage. So if you do have a faith build, you do have some type of electricity, pay attention to the elements, and you could really turn the tide in a certain situation. Versus if it's like really sunny outside, or it's like in the morning time and it's dry, then and you use a fire spell, then it'll do extra damage. And I wanted to show you that right there, to show that Golden Vow, all it says is it increases your attack and it increases your defense. What it doesn't say is that it increases your spell damage. So as you see right here, when I hit it for about 944. Now I'm buffing with the Golden Vow. Sorry, I called it God's Vow. Golden Vow. Now watch how much damage I do this time. Went from 944 to a whopping 1143, right? Now that's the difference between staggering a boss, killing a boss, and just kind of tickling the boss, right? And now I'm gonna throw this fire, even with the stat buff, only 600, and with the thunder, 768, right? So as you can see, because of the rain that's happening outside, it's actually causing the damage to decrease. And of course, you don't want to just be throwing spells just to be throwing spells. One of the main reasons why I like to use this area is because these are flying creatures too. And this ability has enough knockback to put them on the ground. So it's that ability itself, that's one of the main reasons why I would say it's good to have a faith build if you're not just trying to cheese the game as a mage. You can, of course, it is a little bit of a late game item that you would get. And what it does is it provides enough knockback to knock enemies that are flying onto the ground. Everybody was hyping up this Mimic as well. Some people think, oh, as soon as I get the Mimic, the game is over. Not really, and especially since they nerfed the Mimic in this recent patch. Now, the Mimic is less aggressive. It mainly focuses on auto attacks and barely does anything, to be honest with you. But as you can see there, if I do one heavy attack, it'll knock it down on its back, right? Now, when you take into account what type of weapon you use, you also have to take into account how often do I want to be able to stagger my opponents, and how much poise do I want to have. Like with a weapon like this, you don't have much poise. So the chances of you actually getting hit while you hit are pretty high. So having your attacks become negated as you play can get a little frustrating. Like for this particular weapon, I would have to hit them 3 times in a row before I would stagger them onto the ground, right? Versus if I'm using something that's a bit heavier, or like a great sword or a great hammer, then I'll have to do it a lot less. Now, even then, certain great swords would still take a certain amount of hits just to put them on the ground, and that in itself is somewhat of a trade-off. You have to ask yourself, okay, do I want to deal a lot of damage really fast, but I have the opportunity of getting hit, or do I want to be able to make trades, have a higher health pool, and still be able to outlast my opponent and kind of wear them down? Unfortunately, on this game, because of the bosses having a lot more faster attack strings, having a heavier weapon isn't that good. It's actually almost stupid to have a heavier weapon, because you're really geared towards doing either jump heavies, or you're geared towards really waiting for those openings where the boss really throws themselves out. And a lot of the later level bosses, they don't have big openings. As you can see, for this one, I have this one, I think it's like plus 6. This is the plus 6 Erd tree. Alright, so it's not even the same level as the next weapon that I'm going to use. Of course, I buff it with the Golden Vow and all that stuff afterwards, so you can see the difference. What they're trying to The main thing that I'm trying to showcase here is that for the mimics now, because they're so attack heavy instead of being more aggressive and using a lot of their spells, having a colossal weapon with a mimic is actually extremely helpful. The reason I'm saying that is because the stat requirements for stamina don't really apply for the mimics. Oh, side note, actually, this is a really good place if you want to farm for experience and you don't feel like cheesing. This is a really nice place you can go. It's called the Fort of Faroth. You come here, so like watch it with the stagger. 1, 2, and it'll stagger it. Instead of me having to hit it 3 times. So just 2 times, and it'll stagger. And what you would want to do if you're going to build with something that's heavy like this is geared to more towards endurance and more towards vigor, so you can trade with them when they try to hit you, and then endurance so that you can hit them enough times to continue to have enough stamina to get them on the ground. That way you can finish them easy. And this Erdtree Slam is extremely powerful if you actually land it. Like, this thing is +6 versus these guys, and it hits for like 1,000. As you just saw, it put it straight on the ground as well. But that one's a little harder to hit, and you kind of have to put it in a corner for it to happen. And the only reason I'm showing that weapon is to show how great a colossal weapon can be. It also increases your poise mid-swing. So having a colossal weapon is good for PvP if you can lock down your opponent. Because once you get one hit in, you can chain attacks. And if they try to hit you, say with like a dagger or something, you can knock them out of their weapon arts and continue to do what you were doing. So that's why a lot of tank builds haven't been successful, is because a lot of people don't realize the dynamic behind it. Now this one is literally the strongest weapon I have, as you saw before. When I two-hand it with Golden Vow, it'll put it at 100 or 900 attack power. So watch the difference in the way the NPC plays it now. Right, the mimic that I summon will do a lot less than it used to, right? So it used to spam the abilities with the weapon art. It used to deal so much damage and use all of the armaments, but now it's very passive. Okay, so of course, if you heavy an opponent that doesn't see you're coming, you're gonna always stagger them. But watch, 1, 2, and 3, and then it staggers, right? So even though the damage is a lot, it doesn't make a difference in terms of staggering. What staggers the actual opponent is the weapon type. So colossal great hammers, like really heavy weapons, those are the ones that you're gonna want to go for if you're trying to just hit the opponent once or twice and then put them on the ground and then finish them. And that's like actually a really good strategy to use when you're trying to dispatch like a big group of enemies. Because if you can knock one of them down, or if you can displace one of them, then it makes it that much easier for you. And as you can see, the Mimic is not like super OP by any means. This thing is just dying to a regular mob. So keep that in mind. Don't really worry too much about this Mimic summon. If anything, there's another summon that you can get. The only thing that makes that summon good is the fact that it can use Estus. But I've noticed that it hasn't been using Estus. As you can see just then when it was fighting, it didn't even use any Estus. And it barely got hit at all. There's another summon, and those summons, it summons like 5 little shield minions, and I think you get those in the Nokron City. That's like right after the Mimic tier actually. So the one that you get after the Mimic tier is actually a little bit better than the Mimic tier itself. The only way that the Mimic is good is if you have a lot of busted spells and really strong damage on your weapon. And if it's basically, in order for the Mimic to be strong, you have to have a dummy build in order for the Mimic to be strong. Now, if you want to just spec your level to be just level 100, you can kind of take away a few points in vigor, a few points in endurance, a few points in mind, a few points in dexterity. The main thing you're going to want to focus on is strength and faith. Because, as you can see, I have the the Great Seal, the America's seal, and the other seal as well that increases the damage. And that'll put you in a situation where even though, yeah, you're going to be hitting very, very hard, you're going to have the ability to equip heavier items because it'll boost your stats a bit. So when a lot of people say, okay, this guy's definitely over leveled, what they really mean is, okay, this guy knows how to spec his character, because this character is essentially not a glass cannon, but a semi-glass cannon in the respects that if I were to get hit once or twice, I could drop, but my hits are so strong, and this is a build that relies heavily on getting your rolls in and your evades in at the right times, as well as paying attention to the openings in the fight. And once you get to that point where you can really pay attention and realize you can roll through just about anything, you won't really worry too much about armor. Armor is helpful though, don't get me wrong. Armor is extremely helpful. Armor puts you in a position where you would be alive, in most cases where you would die, but that only takes place when you get to like the heavier armors, like the Radon armor and the Lionel armor. That armor is extremely helpful, and so is the Banished Knight armor. Banished Knight is actually the helmet that I have, and I think that one's the coolest out of all of it. So whenever you're deciding on armor, if it's anything that's light or medium, 9 times out of 10 it's not going to provide you much protection at all anyway, so it's essentially the same as playing naked. What I would recommend is focusing more on damage, right? Because the game has given you the ability to have a momentary moment of invincibility in just one button, right? So if you see your role as an opportunity to be invincible, then you'll completely rethink the way you play instead of focusing on just blocking all the time. Because when you have a shield, you take away damage. A shield takes away damage, and you can worry about parrying all you want, or you can put yourself in a position where you're saying, okay, I'm confident in my DPS enough to know that if the boss misses me, I'm gonna make the boss pay. That's pretty much the best way to go about doing it. And if you are, I suppose, are wondering whether you should go sword and shield or if you should go just straight with your weapon and two-handed all the time, then the answer is always to go to two-handed is the best, and it puts you in the best situation to make the best builds. Not that you would really get a good idea of what the weapon damage would be like, since I'm kind of spamming Elden Stars right now. I didn't see this dragon coming, but I just wanted you to see just how much damage you can do as a paladin without being a mage. So essentially, you don't have to be a mage. In fact, this is one of the most paladin friendly of the Soul series. They actually benefit you from having a lot of faith. Arcane is the one that they kind of really scuffed you on, but this boss, or this mini boss, you don't even have to fight. You're just inside the cave, and I wanted to showcase the damage because this is what it actually looks like playing with a build where you can get one shot of retribution. So you have to pay attention to this boss, and you have to use your buffs. You know what I mean? You have to use your electrify armament. You're gonna have to use your golden vow. So it's not easy to play with this build by any means. What I'm pretty much trying to instill is the fact that if you want to deal damage, you have to sacrifice certain elements and improve certain elements of your gameplay. One of the improvements that you have to make is you have to be able to dodge better, and one of the sacrifices that you have to make is that you have to not be as reliant on just blocking. Right? Because if you're just reliant on blocking the entire time, you're not going to be able to deal as much damage as you normally would. Right? So as you can see here, you see how what it would be like if I was just sitting there, just kind of hoping that the boss will come out and give me opportunities and throwing lightning. So that's not really how you want to play the rest of the game. And if you do want to play like that, then this isn't the character for you. The way that you're gonna want to play this is like you would as a battle mage, right? So you armament up, you put on your vow, you go in head first, make sure you're dual wielding it or two-handing it, and you're just gonna go in. There's really no way around it. Being fearful with this build isn't the way to play. You won't be able to get cheap stats from that. The whole exploit of this build is to watch the boss and see what you can do at that point. So as you can see, I said, okay, so I can't use just a weapon art at all times, so I have to find some kind of opening. So I noticed that if I continue to stay around his right hind leg, that he's going to do his huge ability there. And at that point, I can use my weapon art to somewhat slide behind his melee attacks. Right? There he goes again. He's going to come up. So all you have to do is stay on his hind leg, on his hind right leg, keep on going up to try to smack you. If you step away too far back, then he'll try to run at you. Just watching it again. Make him pay. That's basically all you have to do. Comes back around. And at that point, instead of using this weapon as a finisher, the weapon art deals so much more DPS faster, so I just use it that way. And in other situations, the reason why I say that the Mimic is not that helpful is because what it really boils down to is the fact that the Mimic itself is more of a meat shield. It's more of a means to, okay, some of the aspects of this game would require multiplayer, and having a summon allows you to have that multiplayer feel and that multiplayer protection without, of course, sacrificing the whole, oh man, I have to worry about other people needing to play. So as you can see here, this is one of those double bosses, and of course whenever there's a double boss, there's always going to be a gimmick behind it. One of them's ranged, one of them's up close, one of them's squishy. So I lead in with Elden Stars. This is why this build is so great. You lead in with Elden Stars, it draws them in. Of course he's going to have to go in there and fight your clone. In the meantime, you can take care of the guy in the back. And when you get one of these characters with their back against the wall and they have nowhere to back up to, that is when this build really shines. Because at that point, then you can just come in and do whatever you want. So, in a nutshell, guys, just make sure that you're paying attention to the attribute scaling. Strength faith builds are extremely viable, and if you play like this and you try to show anyone, they'll just say you're over-leveled and overpowered, and they'll have absolutely no idea how to deal damage like this. But you do, because you just watched the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you next time. Until then, peace out, and stay golden.